The lake was perfectly still that summer, too still, in fact. Locals in Pine Hollow used to say Willow Lake had moods. Some mornings it shimmered like glass, reflecting the sunrise with a serenity that calmed the heart. Other days, it frothed with wind and rain like something alive and angry beneath the surface. But the night Anna and her fiancé Daniel arrived at the rented lake house, the air carried a strange quiet. Not even the frogs were singing. The dock creaked softly under their boots as they unloaded their bags, the reflection of the house lights rippling faintly on the water like a second home waiting below. The house itself was old, built in the 1940s by a logging family who'd vanished decades ago. The owners mentioned that detail casually, saying, "They probably just moved away." Anna laughed it off. Daniel didn't. He was the kind who noticed things: the faint smell of wet wood, the single bulb flickering in the upstairs hallway, the way the wallpaper had swollen from unseen moisture. That first night, after unpacking, Anna stood by the bedroom window, staring at the black mirror of the lake. She thought she saw a faint light, like a lantern, drifting near the center. But when she blinked, it was gone. By the second day, the air inside the house felt heavy. Daniel's phone wouldn't hold a signal, and the radio picked up only static. While he tried to fix the old generator outside, Anna decided to explore. She found a narrow door at the end of the upstairs hall, a door that wasn't on the rental map. Behind it was a steep stairway leading down to a small boathouse that connected directly to the lake. The wood was slick, the air damp. And at the bottom, through a small half-circle window, she saw something impossible. Her reflection was looking back, smiling, though she hadn't moved. That night, Anna didn't tell Daniel. She tried to convince herself it was her imagination. But around midnight, the generator cut off again, and the entire house fell into darkness. From the dock, Daniel's flashlight beam trembled across the water, and then caught something floating. It was an old photograph, soaked and warped, showing two people who looked eerily like them standing in front of the same house. When he showed Anna, her face drained of color. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, were the words, "We came back. Don't stay after dark." Neither slept. The next morning, the lake was no longer still. It moved like it was breathing, and the reflection of the house had changed, one window too many. Anna screamed when she realized it was the boathouse window, and in that reflection, her smiling double stood waiting, hand pressed against the glass from beneath the water. The old cabin at Marrow Lake had been abandoned for decades before the Warrens bought it. They weren't thrill seekers, just a couple in their 40s hoping to renovate and flip the property. The listing photos showed a peaceful view, pine trees, smooth water, a private dock. But what drew Lisa Warren most was the promise of quiet. After her brother's death the year before, silence had become a kind of comfort, an escape from the noise of grief. Her husband, Mark, was more practical. He wanted to make something new out of something forgotten. Neither of them asked why the cabin was so cheap. From the moment they arrived, the silence felt wrong. Not calm, dead. The forest pressed close around the lake, thick with branches that blocked out most of the sky. When Mark stepped onto the dock, he frowned. "This water's not right," he muttered. It wasn't black, exactly, it was a deep, shifting green, like it swallowed light instead of reflecting it. As Lisa unpacked, she noticed something odd in the living room floorboards, a large metal ring, half-rusted, bolted to a trapdoor. She tugged once. It wouldn't move. When she asked Mark about it later, he said, "Don't worry about that yet. Probably just storage." That night, the temperature dropped fast. Lisa woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of splashing outside. Thinking it was an animal, she peeked through the blinds, and froze. A lantern floated about 20 feet from shore, light swaying gently. Then she saw a shape just beneath the surface, pale and motionless, as though someone were lying on their back under the water. She gasped, and the lantern went out instantly. The next morning, there was nothing there, but muddy footprints led from the dock to the cabin door. Mark tried to brush it off, saying the lake played tricks on the eyes, but Lisa wasn't convinced. She went back to the trapdoor. This time, it opened easily, as if whatever held it shut before had been waiting for her to try again. A ladder descended into darkness. The smell of damp earth hit her first, followed by something colder, metallic, like blood in water. She climbed down halfway and shined her flashlight around. The beam caught stone walls, and in the center of the space, she saw water pooling, rippling upward, not down. That's when she heard whispering. It wasn't echoing through the room, it was coming from the water itself. Lisa screamed for Mark. But when he rushed in, she was standing still, eyes unfocused, staring at the black pit beneath her feet. "It's him," she whispered. "He's here." Mark yanked her out and slammed the trapdoor shut. They left that night, driving until dawn. The next owners, years later, found the trapdoor sealed with chains, and beneath the boards, faint scratches spelling out two words, "Stay below." When Evan Cole inherited his uncle's property at Hollow Point Lake, he expected a broken pier and maybe a few unpaid taxes. What he got instead was a fully furnished, sealed-up cabin sitting directly on the water, the floorboards warped from years of moisture. He'd barely been there an hour before he found the first oddity, a drawer filled with Polaroids. Each one showed the lake at night, no faces, no people, just the water, smooth and black, like someone was documenting something they could never quite capture. On the back of the last photo, his uncle had written, "If it calls you by name, don't answer." Evan assumed it was nonsense. His uncle had gone missing years ago, labeled a recluse who'd lost his mind. But that night, as the wind died and the fog crept over the water, Evan heard something faint. It wasn't wind or frogs or the usual forest noises. It was whispering. Slow. Rhythmic. He leaned out the window over the lake, his breath fogging the glass, and for a moment, it was unmistakable. A voice. A woman's. Softly repeating his name. "Evan, come see." The sound came not from the trees, but from the water itself. When he threw on his flashlight, the beam caught a ripple in the exact shape of a hand. By morning, the lake was calm again. But the house felt wrong, air heavy, mirrors fogged over though it wasn't cold. When he tried to start his truck to leave, the engine wouldn't turn. The nearest neighbor was 6 miles away, so he decided to wait it out. Around dusk, he found an old journal in a drawer beside the bed. The first page made his stomach drop. Marrow, Willow, Hollow. 3 lakes. 1 current. The reflection moves between them. It was signed Daniel H., 1983. Evan froze. Daniel Hart was the man missing from Willow Lake, the one whose fiancée had vanished. The story he'd heard about when he was a kid. He read on, "The reflection is not yours. It's the water remembering. It wants you to join it." That night, Evan sat by the dock, journal in hand, flashlight dying. The lake was a mirror again, utterly still. Then, slowly, his reflection began to move, head tilting, eyes blinking out of sync with his own. Its lips moved, whispering something he couldn't hear. He leaned closer. The surface broke. A pale arm shot out of the water and grabbed him by the wrist, ice cold. He screamed and stumbled back, but when the water settled again, the reflection remained, staring up at him, lips curved into a soft, knowing smile. Evan ran to the cabin and locked the door. As dawn broke, the police found the house empty, a trail of wet footprints leading from the dock to the bedroom window. On the nightstand sat the journal, open to the final line, freshly written in shaky handwriting. "It finally called my name." To this day, locals swear on quiet nights all 3 lakes, Willow, Marrow, and Hollow, glow faintly blue under the moon. And if you whisper your own name over the water, something will whisper it back. The disappearance of Evan Cole made the local papers for a week before fading into rumor. But to Detective Marla Vance, it was more than just another missing camper. The pattern was too strange: 3 vanished couples, 1 lone man, all tied to lakes less than 40 miles apart. Each shoreline bore the same sign, warped footprints half filled with water, as if the ground itself had tried to swallow them. When she reviewed the photos from the first scene, something caught her eye. In the reflection of the lake, behind the victim's shadow, there was another figure standing upright in the water, watching. Marla wasn't the kind to believe in folklore. She'd grown up near Willow Lake herself and had swum there 100 times. But when she returned to the site, she couldn't shake the quiet. Even the birds stayed away. As she walked the edge of the dock, the boards groaned like breath. She called out for backup but got only static on the radio. Then, faintly, she heard something drift across the lake, a child's voice, singing. 3 words, "Stay below, stay below." The sound came from beneath the dock. She knelt down, flashlight trembling, and saw faces beneath the water, distorted but unmistakable, eyes open, mouths moving soundlessly in the current. Panicked, she fell back, splashing herself. The faces vanished instantly. When she scrambled to her car, she found her tires half sunk in wet mud that hadn't been there an hour before. In the trunk, she kept a box of evidence from the other lake disappearances, photos, maps, journals. She spread them across the hood. That's when she saw it. Each lake, Willow, Marrow, and Hollow, formed a perfect triangle. And at the center of that triangle, marked only by an X on an old forestry map, was a dry basin long drained by flood control. The locals called it Deadwater Hollow. That night, Marla drove there alone. The hollow was dry, cracked, silent, yet when she stepped into the basin, she could hear water moving somewhere below. She found remnants of an old foundation, wood posts, rusted tools, a child's toy boat half buried in the dirt. And then she saw it, a perfectly round hole, about 6 feet wide, bubbling faintly. The air around it pulsed like heat. When she peered over the edge, a rush of wind hit her face, carrying whispers that sounded like names. Dozens of them. Familiar ones. People from her missing persons files. Marla dropped a flare into the hole. It fell for what seemed like forever before hitting water. For a second, the light illuminated hundreds of pale forms floating just beneath the surface, men, women, children, all staring upward, waiting. Then, one by one, they turned their faces toward her. The ground beneath her boots softened into mud. Something cold and wet brushed her ankle. She fired her gun into the dark, but the echo swallowed it whole. Her last transmission was a single line, choked and static-filled. "They're not reflections, they're waiting to come back." The next morning, rescuers found her car at the edge of the hollow, doors open, radio hissing with distant voices. The ground where she'd stood was wet, though it hadn't rained in weeks. And when they looked into the basin, the hole was gone. Only cracked earth remained, except for one new detail. A single child's voice recorder half buried in the dirt, still playing her last words backward. Before there were cabins or campsites, before there were even names like Willow or Marrow, the valley was simply called the Hollowing. Locals say it earned that name because of how the land sounded before it was flooded, like it was breathing through the soil. In 1912, when the logging company Silverpine Timber Company built the first dam, they drowned the valley, flooding 3 small settlements under what would become the lakes we know today. The project foreman, Thomas Vail, kept a daily journal, one that was later recovered, its pages warped and water-stained. Every entry ended the same way. "The water is rising. And it knows my name." Thomas's crew had been the first to notice strange things after the dam filled. Voices carried over still water when no one was around. Lanterns flickered on the surface, even on windless nights. Workers claimed they saw their reflections waving after they'd already turned away. 2 men went missing in the same week. One was found floating days later, eyes open, his face identical to the man who'd last seen him alive. The other was never found. The company ordered the area sealed. The dam held, but the people nearby began reporting nightmares, of drowned children pressing their palms against windows, of reflections whispering, "Let us breathe." In his final entry, dated September 29, 1912, Thomas wrote something that chills historians to this day. "We flooded a church. We thought it was empty. The preacher's wife refused to leave. She said the lake was hungry. Said it needed a mirror. Said once the water learned a face, it would never forget it." After that, his handwriting becomes jagged and smeared. The last line reads, "The mirror has opened." More than a century later, archaeologists excavating a dried section of Deadwater Hollow discovered remnants of that same church, its altar facing upward, as though built for the water to see. Beneath it, they found human bones bound with iron chains, each skull facing a polished slab of obsidian. The scientists who unearthed the site reported an unexplainable echo that distorted audio recordings, voices repeating their questions seconds after they spoke them. Within a month, 2 team members disappeared while boating across Willow Lake at night. Their cameras were recovered 3 days later. The final frame showed the reflection of the old church rising faintly from the lakebed, as if seen through glass. Locals now say the lakes are not connected by rivers but by memory. That every reflection is a doorway, one side for the living, the other for those who drowned when the valley was taken. The more people visit, the stronger the mirror becomes. Those who vanish are said to have been remembered by the water. And if you stand on the dock at midnight and whisper your own name, you might just hear someone whisper it back, in your voice, from below. By 2024, Deadwater Hollow had become an urban legend among divers and amateur ghost hunters. Most who came left with nothing but eerie stories of malfunctioning cameras and distorted radio static. But when a group called the Hollow Seekers, for experienced divers known for documenting abandoned underwater sites, posted that they'd found the coordinates of the lost church beneath Marrow Lake, their video went viral. What wasn't released was the second recording, the one recovered by police after the dive went silent halfway through. The footage begins with clear audio, team leader Jonas Reed, 36, explaining their descent plan. The water is murky, visibility low. Their headlamps reveal fragments of old timber, a rusted bell, and what looks like a church roof partially buried in silt. "That's it," Jonas says, his voice shaking with awe. "The obsidian altar, right there." As the group circles it, their lights catch something odd, dozens of glassy black stones embedded around the structure. They're shaped like mirrors, each one faintly reflecting their faces even though the water should scatter the light. "Are these eyes?" one diver whispers. Then, the reflections begin to move, the audio degrades into static. A distorted voice repeats fragments of their dialogue out of sync, like an echo that's alive. That's it, right there," but the words deepen, overlapping, growing slower, until a low female voice whispers clearly, "We remember you." One diver screams. The camera tilts wildly as bubbles and light flash. Through the blur, the lens captures something human-shaped emerging from the altar, white skin, hair drifting like weeds, eyes black as obsidian. Jonas shouts, "Up, go up now," but the others don't move. Their bodies float still, mouths open, as if listening to something underwater. The last minute of footage shows Jonas alone, light flickering, bubbles rising fast. He turns the camera toward himself, breathing hard. His eyes are wide. "It's not a ghost," he gasps. "It's the water." The feed cuts. 3 days later, rescue teams found one oxygen tank washed up on the north shore, marked with deep, circular burns. No bodies were ever recovered. But sonar scans taken afterward revealed something new on the lakebed, something shaped like an open doorway where the church altar used to be. Now, on quiet nights, boaters on Marrow Lake claim to see faint light beneath the water, like flashlights moving in slow circles. And if you listen carefully, you can hear bubbles rising from nowhere, followed by a voice whispering, "We remember you, Jonas." 2 weeks after the Hollow Seekers vanished beneath Marrow Lake, a fisherman named Elias Doran radioed in a distress call from the north shore. He'd found a woman floating near the reeds, face down, hair tangled with lakeweed. At first, he thought she was dead. But when he flipped her over, she gasped, eyes snapping open. "Don't let it see me," she whispered, clutching his arm with nails sharp enough to draw blood. Her name was Mara Keller, one of the missing divers. She was taken to St. Elora Hospital, where she lay trembling, refusing mirrors, refusing even a glass of water near her. Her body temperature hovered unnaturally low. Doctors noted faint web-like scars along her neck and wrists, as if something had tried to pull her apart and put her back together again. When investigators questioned her, she spoke in a rasp, every word sounding like it came from someone else's throat. "We didn't drown," she said. "It drowned through us." Mara's fragmented account chilled everyone in the room. She said when the church doors opened underwater, it wasn't an object that came out, it was the reflection itself, taking shape from the memories of those who entered. "The lake doesn't want you to die," she murmured, staring into the floor. "It wants you to remember. It learns you, piece by piece, until you can't tell which side of the mirror you're on." She claimed she'd escaped only because her reflection let her go. When pressed on what that meant, Mara smiled faintly, an expression that didn't match the terror in her eyes. "It didn't want me," she said. "It already had me." Security footage from her hospital room showed her sleeping that night, then sitting up at precisely 3:03 a.m., head tilted. The lights flickered. In the reflection of the dark window beside her bed, her body remained lying down. The mirrored version opened its eyes first. Then, slowly, she reached out her hand toward the glass. The feed cut to static for 7 seconds. When it returned, Mara was gone. The bed was soaked. The window was open. Police divers searched the lake again the following day but found nothing. However, at the exact depth where the altar once stood, a new object appeared on sonar, a perfect human silhouette, arms outstretched, facing upward. It wasn't moving, but the water around it pulsed as though breathing. Locals who pass by now say sometimes, if the moon is right, you can see a woman's reflection walking along the shore, even when no one is there. By late autumn, the Marrow Lake disappearances had become a full-scale investigation. The department called in Dr. Adrian Wolfe, a forensic psychologist turned paranormal researcher, infamous for exposing fraudulent hauntings. He didn't believe in curses, until he reviewed the footage from the Hollow Seeker's dive. Frame by frame, he saw something no one could explain. Each diver's reflection moved an instant before they did. It wasn't an optical error. It was anticipation. Dr. Wolfe gathered a small task force, 2 officers, a sonar tech, and an environmental diver named Lucia Tran, to descend to the exact coordinates of the doorway. The lake was colder than it should have been for the season, the temperature dropping 5 degrees in less than a minute once they reached the midpoint. At 140 feet, their sonar readings warped into a perfect ring. Inside that circle, nothing reflected sound. "It's like the water's hollow," Lucia whispered through the radio. Then came the whispering, faint, rhythmic, repeating each diver's name. The descent camera recorded something incredible. A shimmering layer, like liquid glass, hovered horizontally across the lake bed, a membrane between worlds. Wolfe called it the mirror veil. Lucia reached out and touched it with the tip of her glove. The surface flexed. Her reflection reached back, palm to palm. "Feels warm," she breathed. Then her reflection smiled, but she didn't. The water convulsed. Every light flickered as the reflection pulled. The sonar spiked, reading multiple human forms moving at impossible speed. Wolfe screamed for them to surface, but Lucia was gone, her tether line slack, her reflection still visible on the camera feed, watching them from inside the veil. In the final frames, Wolfe's own reflection turned to face the camera before he did, mouthing words no one could decipher. The feed cut to black. 2 days later, rescue divers recovered Wolfe's equipment. His helmet was full of lake water, though the seals were intact. On the inside of the visor, written backward in condensation, were 4 words. She crossed the mirror. That night, residents of all 3 lakes, Willow, Marrow, and Hollow, reported the same phenomenon. Every body of water reflected the same image: a woman standing beneath the surface, hair floating, eyes open, hands pressed to the inside of the mirror. And when the wind passed, the water whispered a single name, Lucia. The first sign came from Hollow Point, 3 nights after Lucia vanished. Residents awoke to the sound of dripping, not rain, but something thicker. When they looked, water was seeping from mirrors, televisions, even the glass of their picture frames. The liquid pooled across floors and vanished into the wood, leaving behind damp handprints. By dawn, 8 houses had flooded from the inside out. Surveillance footage from one home showed a reflection in the hallway mirror that didn't match the person holding the camera. It lagged, then smiled, and whispered, "You brought us through." Meanwhile, at Marrow Lake, the waterline had risen by nearly 3 feet overnight, though no rain had fallen in weeks. The authorities drained a section to investigate, but when the pump started, they ran dry in under 10 minutes, as though the lake were refilling itself faster than they could remove it. Divers were forbidden to enter after one was found on shore, drowned in an inch of water. His lungs were filled not with liquid, but a fine black silt identical to the material that once coated the altar's obsidian slab. Dr. Wolf's recovered footage was reanalyzed by a government team. Frame by frame, experts noted new anomalies, shapes forming behind Lucia's reflection, each resembling the faces of past victims. The reflection wasn't a mirror anymore, it was a window. Then came the blackout. For 72 hours, the 3 lake regions lost power. No wind, no wildlife, no sound except the lapping of unseen waves. Residents described their reflections moving seconds too late or whispering in different voices. Some claimed they saw lights beneath the streets, as though water was running below the town itself. At 3:03 a.m., every reflective surface, from kitchen knives to cell phone screens, briefly turned black, then showed a single image, an open doorway under a green lake, and a hand reaching out. When it faded, all clocks stopped at the same time. By sunrise, Hollow Point Lake had vanished. In its place was a hollow depression of cracked mud, yet the air shimmered with humidity, and faint ripples moved across the ground as if water still remembered how to exist there. Scientists reported hearing echoing voices when they stood near the basin, repeating their own words backward. The mirror veil had not collapsed, it had inverted. The reflection was now our world, and what was below had finally found its way through. That night, people along the valley's edge noticed their lakes glowing faintly blue again. But this time, the light came not from the moon, but from below, where hundreds of pale figures now stood beneath the surface, all facing upward. Waiting. When the lakes vanished, the world barely noticed. News called it a geological event, a sinkhole chain reaction. But those who lived near the hollowing knew better. The air still tasted of rain though none had fallen. Cell phone screens shimmered black when powered off, showing faces that weren't their own. And deep underground, sensors recorded faint tremors that pulsed like a heartbeat, once every 3 minutes and 3 seconds. In what was left of Marrow Lake's basin, Dr. Adrian Wolf stood alone. He hadn't died in the dive, he'd escaped, though not unchanged. His reflection had been slower ever since, a second delayed, as if waiting for permission. He'd spent weeks tracing the myth through journals, local legends, and the drowned church's blueprints. Every clue pointed to the same truth: the lakes weren't cursed, they were designed. The preacher's wife had not worshipped a god. She had built one. Being born from mirrored faith, an intelligence that grew every time a reflection was seen upon water. The more humans gazed into it, the more of them it became. At midnight, Wolf set up floodlights across the cracked basin, their beams converging where sonar once detected the doorway. He carried a metal case, inside it an obsidian shard retrieved from the lake bed, the last remnant of the altar. When he placed it on the ground, the air rippled. A faint image formed across the surface, his own face, flickering. "I know you can hear me," he said quietly. "You want to come through? Then take me. End it." The reflection blinked once, then smiled. The ground softened, water seeping up between cracks, rising until it reached his knees. Wolf held his position, trembling. The reflection mirrored him perfectly, until it didn't. Its head tilted the other way. Its mouth moved first. "You already did." The floodlights exploded. Cameras shorted out. Witnesses later claimed the entire basin glowed blue for several minutes, visible from towns 20 miles away. When rescue teams arrived, Wolf's equipment lay submerged in a single, circular pool of water that hadn't been there before. At the center, his reflection rippled faintly, though there was nothing above it to cast. 1.3 nights later, Willow Lake returned. Perfectly still, perfectly round, as if it had never drained. But locals say the shoreline is different now, the trees reflecting at impossible angles, the moonlight bending wrong. And if you stand quietly at the water's edge, you'll see your reflection smiling just a little too soon. It said the water remembers every face it's ever seen. And now, when it looks back, it's not asking for help. It's counting.